Welcome to For Better or For Court, Family Law in New Jersey.
Hello and welcome to For Better or For Court, Family Law in New Jersey with Miss Alix Claps. Alix is a partner at Heymann and Fletcher and a certified matrimonial law attorney with years of experience guiding clients through divorce, custody, and complex family law matters across New Jersey. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're going to learn more about Alix and then talk about what you need to know before filing for divorce. From legal basics to emotional readiness and everything in between, this is what to know before filing for divorce in New Jersey. Alix, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good, Evan. How are you?
I'm good. So right before we get into it, before we dive into the legal side, can you tell us kind of what led you into family law and why you're so passionate about helping people get through divorce?
Like some of the best things in life, I got here accidentally. Law is my second career. I was a stage manager for many, many years and decided that came with too little work-life balance. So I'd go to law school because that's where the real work-life balance exists, as we all know, lawyers, good at that. I clerked in civil part and I still do civil law as well. And when I was looking for a job, this firm who does a little bit of everything happened to be hiring, and I met my partners now, Ron Heymann and Steve Fletcher. And I was like, I got to work with these guys. And I learned family law from them and from a bunch of great attorneys that exist in Morris County. And really, I do enjoy it. And it's not, in some ways it's really different than other types of law, but in some ways to approach it as a lawyer, it's very similar to the other types of law.
So why family law? There's a whole bunch of different laws you could practice, though. What kind of drew you to family law?
Well, solving people's problems is ultimately what, I think good lawyers hope to do. We're there to fix problems, and there's nothing more personal than a family law problem, whether it's figuring out a divorce and your next steps, whether it's a custody battle, whether it's adopting a child. Even the good things come with complications and trying to work your way through a system that most people don't encounter during their lives. I think most people never go to family court or any other type of court, except perhaps jury duty. So if I can help make the process easier and help people enjoy their lives a little more, that's what I want to do.
So let's start with the subject at hand. What are the first legal, decisions someone needs to make when they're thinking about a divorce, Alix?
So marriage is about a dynamic, working together, being a team. And if that team starts to break down, then in my opinion, if you're thinking about divorce, you have to think about what's your next step? What's your post-divorce life look like? Because that's the decision you have to make. It's not, do I stay in this marriage or do I go to a different marriage? You don't get a trade. You're making a transition step to something else. So it's, do I stay in this marriage? What is it doing for me? What am I giving to it? How is it impacting my life versus what does my life look like if I am no longer married to this person? So it's about taking those, not being afraid of those steps or those thoughts. That's the first thing, is to kind of think through, what does it mean to be divorced?
Do you take it from a legal approach, or do you, mix in empathy, because you're dealing with human beings and this transition? How do you kind of balance that?
I try and have some empathy, but one of my mottos is you can be as emotional as you want about your divorce and your marriage, feel all your feelings, but you don't want me to be personally invested in your divorce. That's not going to get you the best result. It's certainly not going to get you the most efficient result, because you're coming with it with years of baggage, years of trauma, perhaps years of unhappiness. You need someone who's going to tell you, hey, this is what's important towards working your way towards a conclusion, and here's what's not relevant for divorce purposes. It can be relevant to you personally, but the court doesn't want to hear about that. The court's not going to solve that problem. So you got to separate that. And I feel like I'm going to listen to my client. I'm going to hear everything that you have to say, but I'm going to tell you what's germane and what's not.
How important is timing when it comes to filing? Legally, emotionally, is there such a thing as too soon, or is there anything in particular that kind of separates that?
In a lot of ways, I find people file too late. And if you file too late, you wait too long, that's where you end up in a Wars of the Roses situation, where you're so focused on revenge. You're so focused on wanting to destroy this person who's made your life unhappy, if you really can't stand your spouse by the time you're filing for divorce, that's going to make it more difficult for both of you. If you're coming at it, the actual filing date and the starting the process can be two different things. In New Jersey, the date that you file the complaint for the divorce is the legal end date of the marriage. Doesn't matter when the divorce decree ends up being filed, the legal end date of your marriage is the date somebody files for divorce. So that can be very important, but it's not everything, because some people want to keep things private. Some people want to work things out without the court making decisions, the court being involved. So you can start the process without starting the filing. But I think people who start the process too late, they're the ones who really end up in these 6-7 year divorces, because they can't let anything go and everybody wants to make it as difficult for the other person as possible.
Well, Alex, you referenced one of my favorite movies. You referenced the Michael Douglas movie with Danny DeVito and Kathleen Turner.
Absolutely. It's up there with Kramer versus Kramer as the great divorce movies of all time.
It really is. It really is. I highly recommend it, audience. If y'all haven't seen that movie, watch War of Roses. What are some practical things people should gather or prepare for filing? Like financial records, housing plans. Is documentation important?
Documentation is extremely important, especially if you've been married, say 10 years or you've been married a length of time. We may need to know what accounts you had coming into the marriage. That can be hard to get after 7 years. So even if we're not ready to resolve your divorce, on day one, I'm going to send you to find the far back financial documents, as far back as you can go. If you've got, a statement from a retirement account from 10 years ago, just find it. Whether we need it or not, have it, because 3 years from now, if we discover we need it, it may be impossible to get. And that can cause, even when everyone's in agreement, that can cause some difficulties in trying to do the math and the calculation. I know when we all go to law school, we're promised lawyers don't do math. There's a lot of math in family law. There's a lot of figuring out financial assets, ongoing support. That's the backwards looking stuff. Gather your tax returns, gather your end of year, your W-2s, your end of year pay stubs, things like that. That'll show how much you paid for the non-tax stuff, your insurance premiums, anything like that, how much you contributed to your 401k during a given year. Try and gather as much of that as possible just to have it. So you're not dealing with having to subpoena financial institutions or companies that have merged with other companies, so nobody knows where those records are anymore. Those are the things you need, like that actually exist. You also need to formulate a plan. You need to know, well, where am I going to live? How much is it going to cost me now? Can I afford to buy a house? Can I afford to rent? In New Jersey in particular, post-divorce housing is one of the biggest problems I see for my cases, because nobody can afford to buy anything and nobody can afford to rent anything. And you're suddenly dealing with maybe 50% of the household income you had when you lived in a house or an apartment together. And it's tough. Some people literally cannot afford to get divorced at the moment as a result of that. It's crazy.
We often hear about the, no-fault divorce in Jersey. What does that mean? And does fault ever still matter?
So no-fault divorce is what New Jersey also calls irreconcilable differences. I would estimate that 95% of all divorces in New Jersey proceed on an irreconcilable differences basis, even though there are a whole bunch of for-cause divorce causes of action that still remain on the books. Like you can use desertion, you can use adultery, you can use extreme cruelty. Nobody can define for me in New Jersey what actually constitutes extreme cruelty, but that's a subject for another day. Because ultimately, with very few exceptions, it doesn't matter why you're filing for divorce. The outcome, the equitable distribution, the spousal support, the child support, the calculation that goes into determining when that's appropriate, almost has nothing to do with the cause of action. There are some exceptions. So if you find out your partner has been having a long-term affair and they have been dissipating marital assets on their affair partner, that may be an instance where you want to plead adultery because you want to try and recoup. Hey, he spent my money or she spent my money on this other person. And that's not fair. That's a financial problem we've got. That's not even an emotional problem. That's a financial problem that needs to be taken into account during the divorce. Fun fact, in New Jersey, if you plead adultery, you have to name the affair partner. You have to name the respondent in the pleading. Otherwise, it's going to get dismissed.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Can you kind of walk us all through what actually happens when someone files for divorce? What are the first steps in the legal process?
So the filing for the divorce is like every other bureaucracy thing. It's a lot of giving the court some information. You're listing things. You're giving them your date of your marriage. You're giving them your address. You're giving them the names and dates of birth of your children. All that stuff. When and where were you married? All that. It's a lot of just naming dates and times and things like that. You're also naming, what are you asking for? You're asking for support. You're asking for equitable distribution. Whether or not you actually think you want support at the end of the day, you list it in the complaint because you're preserving your right. You're making sure I'm asking for the maximum stuff that I could possibly ever want during this process. And another trick, nobody reads the complaint other than to double check the dates. What you ask for in the complaint, unless you're going to trial, you never really come back to it. You also submit a couple other pieces of necessary paperwork, a confidential litigant information statement, where you have to list a whole bunch of private information, your social security number, your date of birth, your driver's license number, your spouse's date of birth, your spouse's driver's license number, your employer's name and address, your insurance information, a whole bunch of stuff. So the court has it, and they keep it secure. I mean, it says confidential because it's not part of a file that can ever be accessed by the public. But that's so the court can make sure you're you. I mean, if your name is John Smith, there are going to be a lot of John Smiths in the court records. You don't want to get your information mixed with somebody else's. So use the confidential litigant information statement is used to help with that. You also fill out a certification of insurance. Not because the court really cares which insurance plan you're on, but because in New Jersey, it's illegal to kick your spouse off of an insurance policy or your children off of an insurance policy while a divorce is pending. That's true for medical insurance. That's true for auto insurance. It's true for, it's less relevant, but you can't cancel the homeowner's insurance policy while the case is pending. And you can't cancel or change the beneficiary of a life insurance policy while the case is pending, because those all impact the other spouse's right. So you fill out the paper so the court has a snapshot of what things are at the start.
Wow, 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 wow. What are some of the most common misconceptions, Alex, about people filing for divorce? Anything that people think they know but they don't know?
The biggest misconception is that it matters why you're getting divorced. I think in every single case, people come with me, they want to tell me their stories, and I think that's great. And I'm happy to hear why you're getting divorced and what made you unhappy, but the court's not going to care about that. They're not your therapist. I'm also not your therapist. I am more expensive than your therapist. You should use your therapist for therapy. You should use me for law. But the court really isn't going to care about, who did the dishes or who didn't for 5 years. That's not going to be something that they want to deal with. Abuse can be something that they care about if you are bringing other certain corollary claims to your divorce. There's a whole separate cause of action that has to deal with what we call marital torts. So if you're alleging that your spouse caused you abuse, your spouse's abuse caused you physical harm and caused you damages, you can bring a separate claim for that. Outside of bringing that claim, 6 months into a divorce where you pled irreconcilable differences, the court's not going to be impacted by your claim of abuse from 10 years earlier.
How does it work if a spouse wants to file and the other one isn't ready to file, or doesn't want to cooperate, or doesn't want a divorce and doesn't want this to happen at all?
A number of things. It doesn't actually matter who's the plaintiff and we still use the terms plaintiff and defendant. They don't mean anything. Other places use petitioner and respondent. It doesn't matter if you're the defendant or the plaintiff in a divorce action. It doesn't change your rights in any way. If you want to get divorced, New Jersey will get you a divorce. How long it takes, how expensive it is, and how emotionally draining it is depends on how much trouble the other party wants to cause. So they can delay, they can make it expensive, they can make it unpleasant. Ultimately, some people are willing to give up more than they should in order to get the process done, because there's a whole lot of cost-benefit analysis that goes into completing a divorce. And that's kind of where that conversation happens. You can't stop somebody from getting divorced, but if you want to, you can make it really unpleasant.
And finally, for someone who's scared or maybe overwhelmed, what's a piece of advice you would give them before they take this first legal step?
I always recommend, if you're thinking about divorce, have a few consults, because your attorney is going to know more about you than anybody else in your life in a divorce matter. You're going to have to be honest with them about embarrassing things, unpleasant things, things that you maybe have never told anybody else. I'm going to know all of your financial information. I'm going to know things about your kids. I'm going to know a lot of stuff. So I want you to feel comfortable with me. If I'm not a person you feel like you want to share with, then I'm not going to be the right divorce attorney for you. And that goes, if you meet with somebody and you don't click with them, they could be they could have the best record in the state, but that's not going to be the right divorce attorney for you.
How do you kind of handle that as a person personally though, Alix? All this information, all these emotions, all this personal information, is that just your professionalism, or have you learned a way to handle all that and compartmentalize that? Because you still have a life as well.
I think compartmentalization is really important. There's a high level of burnout among family law attorneys just generally, because there's a lot of trauma dumping on divorce attorneys. I think that's one of the reasons I also do other areas of law, because it gives me balance even within the workday that people who do exclusively matrimonial law don't get. They don't get a breather. I mean, sometimes they get maybe an adoption, and adoption day is the best day. But if you're dealing with divorce from dawn till dusk, it eats at you. I'll reference another epic divorce movie, although not technically a divorce movie, The Lion in Winter. So,
oh, wow, look at you.
Yeah, I know. Classic. But
we gotta talk movies next episode.
Okay, we'll do a whole bonus episode on divorce movies. But that's a group of people who do nothing but try and destroy each other for like a weekend. The whole thing takes place over a weekend, and they do nothing but try and destroy each other. And even being on the periphery of that and experiencing that can be really difficult. So finding things that I enjoy and that calm me down is important, not just for my own well-being, but so I can have patience with my clients, that I can remain engaged with my clients and I can remain attuned to their needs.
Amazing stuff. Alix, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all so much for joining and listening to the first episode of For Better or For Court, Family Law in New Jersey. If you're considering divorce and don't know where to start, visit HeymanFletcherLaw.com to schedule a consultation with Alix Claps. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review if you found this information helpful, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.